The very first book I wrote was about my great Aunt May, and she was just made, she was one of 13 children, May McGuire. She lived with, she fed all the stray animals, took care of all the birds that had broken wings, and she had a canary that lived on top of her head.
It's the Liars Club Podcast, a weekly conversation filled with insights, tips, and secrets from the myriad of creative people who make stuff up for a living. Stay tuned and you can hear from New York Times bestselling authors, National Book Award finalists, debut novelists, screenwriters, musicians, composers, cartoonists, actors, stand-up comedians, line tamers, and all manner of creators who burn the midnight oil and sometimes their dinner. Whether you're a reader or a fellow writer, join us as we plumb the depths of the creative process for inspiration, semi-plausible stories, and a few laughs. So grab a libation, sit back, and spend some quality time with the creative folks who make stuff up for a living in a lively conversation with the Liars Club. All right, so here we go. You guys all ready?
No.
You're not. Stop jiggling your stuff, Mary. Mary always jiggling your stuff.
Mary cannot leave her
Stuff alone.
Stop jiggling your stuff.
It's kind of embarrassing.
All right, so
I just did it to make him say that.
and it worked. It worked. All right, so we are here at the
Town Book Center.
Town Book Center.
The Town Book Center, formerly known as the Town Book Center and Cafe, now the Town Book Center and Wine Bar.
It's wonderful, just so you know. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful here. And we are in Collegeville, or is this actually Trapp? So this is Collegeville, Pennsylvania, out near Ursinus College, where I actually went to school, as a matter of fact. I was a graduate of Ursinus College. See? This is what a degree from Ursinus will get you, huh? How about it, huh? There you go.
Sidebar.
All right, so a little sidebar there. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Here we are once again with the Liars Club Oddcast, live somewhere in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, the Town Center Bookstore. And so we have a live studio audience, and they're somewhat live. You can tell because I want to ask them to yell and clap. Yell and clap. Very nice. Okay, try this. Sit with a stunned silence. Boy, they're good. They're good. Yeah, they're very convincing. Okay. All right, so here we are. So we're going to introduce right down the line here. I believe, Greg, you are introducing our guest, yes? Or Kelly? Kelly is. Okay, so Kelly, you end the introductions. All right, so here we go.
You will go last.
And I'm Keith Strunk.
I'm John McGoran.
Gregory Frost.
Mary Jones.
Judy Schachner.
No.
I'll take it.
You have to be introduced.
I'm only 8 years old, darling.
And I'm Kelly Simmons.
You are the talent.
We are so keeping that. I love that.
I'm happy to introduce someone who may or may not be here.
Well inspirited.
Judy Schachner. Judy Schachner, described by the New York Times as something like the James Joyce for the elementary school set, which makes no sense to me because James Joyce? Judy? No. But
Judy Joyce.
Judy Schachner is the #1 New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of over 23 books for children, including Bits and Pieces, the Skippy John Jones series, Yo Vikings, Yo, The Granny Man, and William May, and many more. She has won many awards, including the first E.B. White Read Aloud Award. Welcome to the Oddcast, Judy Schachner. She looks so pretty, you guys can't see her, but she really does. And she's blushing a little bit because I just read,
please.
No, her hair is
I
terrific.
can't see her because she's in the shadows.
She is. She's
Dark
in the dark.
shadows.
Near the wine
I'm a
bar.
vampire.
She's the closest one of us to the wine bar, it should be noted.
And
By
I'm
no
Within reaching
accident.
distance.
Exactly.
I'm
So
sure of it.
I have a few questions that are semi-serious, and then I'm sure we will meander into hilarious territory because it's Judy. So the first thing I want to say is you've had a very illustrious and prolific career, especially for someone so young. And I want to start at the beginning.
She's 12.
a little loud.
So I know from your website that you were always an artist. But when did you know that you were going to write children's books? How old were you? What was the revelation? Or was there one?
Well, actually, I think when I was in college, and an illustrator, the Caldecott award-winning author-illustrator of Drummer Huff if any of you remember that book from years and years ago when you had kids, and for Ed Emberley, who's a New Englander, but he's a very famous children's book author, illustrator, and he came to visit our school, and I realized then that perhaps that would be a career I would want. I started
Being a
out
Caldecott winner author. That was your choice.
Yes,
right? Yeah, that's what I want.
haven't we
Just
all
wanted to be an
given those
award winner, it didn't matter
speeches in the mirror, you know?
That's so great.
Yeah, so
you
I
inspired you.
started out as a major in fashion illustration, but they photography wiped that off the planet. So I just went into straight illustration. But I did want to do courtroom illustrating.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a side thing.
yeah.
You never did, though.
I never did.
Do you have like a dark side, Judy?
All children's book authors have a dark side,
Like a mysterious.
sitting hers, right?
Like
and I'm
a
wearing black. So.
I mean, don't all children's books, or most of them, have a dark side? Isn't there always a message of anxiety or possibilities that things could go wrong?
Well, there have been some very famous children's book authors that have not liked children.
Like Roald Dahl,
Shall we name some names?
Charles Adams.
Well, anyway, I won't mention names, but
It'll be in the
but
show
yes,
notes.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of children's book authors have a dark side.
Oh, but I meant about the books, not the authors. But it doesn't matter.
No,
Go on.
yes, and frequently they are things that are
Yeah.
in the books.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you have an interesting process before you write a book, and I think of it as kind of like a little magpie situation with bits and pieces and inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people will find that fascinating.
Well, I only intended to ever illustrate books, so I failed every grammatical course I took in school. I wasn't a good speller. I wasn't a good reader. And the only time I considered writing was when I was visiting New York and a couple of publishers to show my portfolio, and both of them happened to see a character of my great Aunt May that they just happened to use as an illustration. And they both said, do you write? And I lied and said, yes, of course I do. So, and this is the Liars Club, right?
Oh, yeah, lie away.
Yeah, we welcome
So,
lies.
I should be
You're a
I
natural.
should get
Shoo-in.
a medal, a shoe-in. I should, after this. But yeah, I lied, and I went home because they said, well, we would love to see this developed into a book. And I would have panic attacks, and I'm very nervous right now.
Aww.
So I have to say to everybody
Yeah,
that
right.
I am a social phobic and my meds aren't working. Now that I've got that out.
Is there a psychiatrist in the house?
Is there a psychiatrist in the house? Yes. So my mind is like, before Mitt Romney was the Etch-a-Sketch, I am the Etch-a-Sketch. So everything I was going to say to you just left. But yes, I had to go home, write the book, prove that I was a writer, and every night that I did that, I would have a panic attack, and then my hands would, from hyperventilating, my hands would just turn into claws, and then I'd have to breathe into a paper bag to, open them up. So that was the way I started. So I'm not a professional writer. I don't know how to write. I don't pretend to be a writer. I said on your Facebook page, there's a fraud among us.
Right.
So that's me. And the way I got comfortable with coming up with story ideas is doing character Bibles, which are just free-form collaging, a collection of words, sentences, pictures, and illustrations. And that's it. Nothing
But
fancy.
there's some words in there.
Oh, yeah, there's some words.
You can hold it up. You can show people what it looks like, because we have people here.
Bob Shackner, do you know what this is?
Some of these are so beautiful they could almost be inside their own book. I mean, they look very finished to me. I'm sure to you they're very.
Have you ever
early.
Have you ever thought of publishing them?
Not really.
I mean, I was looking at it, and it's really fascinating. I mean,
I don't think
not as your process only, but as your process, but the evolution of ideas and of drawings and language. The whole thing comes alive.
Well, I am a character-driven writer, and I don't really know how, plots are much more difficult for me, and actual story and words and sentences are hard. So doing these first solves many problems for me. So it gives me, voice, and usually problems are solved. I come up with a plot line. By the time I get to the end of it, I really have a whole kind of idea of the story in mind. So it helps. And then I can show this to my editor, because it's really hard for me to explain the book. So I can show this to her, and she can go through and go, oh, yeah, I love this, or can you include this idea? So that's kind of how I do it.
So instead of an outline, it's like a visual.
I could never do an
It's like a
outline.
visual plot.
I am totally inept.
Yeah,
So
well, outlines are hard for many writers, even the least illustrative.
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
it's so bad for you. You can turn your back to me.
You have to know that the sun is shining in our eyes, and
it's
so I'm
so
looking at
funny.
Judy through a grid of my
It's
fingertips.
It's late afternoon light. The sunset light is shining on
all right.
Judy's hair,
Golden hour.
If anybody here was a vampire, it's over for
and
me.
we've all got
But
sunglasses
also,
on.
I want
you
to
know,
just
shadow.
put on the record.
McGoran just
that-
turned into a pile of dust. Is that bad?
Yeah, it's that bad.
That's bad. Okay.
Even more than usual.
Oh, thank you. Oh, geez. I can't even see them. Thank
Put them
you.
over your glasses.
They don't. You know what? They don't help. It's the glare. Thank you so much.
So Judy,
So wait, I want one thing too that I started to say was that, Judy, I want you to stop saying you're inept and all that because
Because
children.
that's Mary's shtick.
No, it is my shtick.
Yeah, but I was raised
get
Irish
off my
Catholic, so I
shtick.
can say that.
But the thing is also
your
that what ends up happening is that your language comes out very reduced to simplicity and precise. And for a children's book, it's exact. It's just what's needed. They don't need paragraphs and paragraphs in these books. They need very specific and vivid language. And that's what you have. So please stop saying that. Applause, yes.
you're supposed to hold a sign up, you know. I don't know. I was just going to. So in a lot of ways, you came to children's books kind of the reverse way that most people do. Usually, writers will come with an idea, and the publisher will hook them up with an illustrator and say, "This is the person that you should be illustrating your story." You know, and you, on the other hand, are the whole picture. I mean, you're everything.
Well, I started out, I mean, I had to prove that I could write a story, but I started out illustrating for other. And I'm probably most proud to say that I illustrated Lloyd Alexander's last picture book.
Oh, wow.
So,
Magnificent.
and Lloyd lived, fairly close to me.
Yeah.
And he lived on Entenmann's, and and we both shared a love of Teletubbies. And I'll tell you one wonderful thing about Tinky Winky. And Lloyd said to me in his crusty old voice, "This is Judy." He said, "Teletubbies is better than Valium." And I agreed. I totally agreed.
That is so funny.
So I'm curious, having illustrated other people's books,
Yeah.
and then also, it seems the bulk of your work, as I understand it, is the stuff that you've written and illustrated yourself. How different is it illustrating your own books compared to illustrating other people's? How different is it process-wise?
Well, early on, because I started illustrating others, I did Donna Jo Napoli's Prince of the Pond series. Those were the first books I did. I was very, very nervous for the first 10 years of doing children's books. I had no confidence, and I'd be very afraid to hand in my work or show my work, and my editor and art director would have to pry it out of my hands. Time to give it up. You have to give it up. But so you feel responsible to the author, and the author has nothing to do. Even though I knew Lloyd, and even though I knew Donna Jo, that's not why I got the jobs. But they have no say really in the illustrator's work.
Right.
So the illustrator adds a different dimension to the work, brings something different to it. And but when I started writing my own work, it just was or illustrating my own work, it just felt more comfortable because I know what I want. I know what I'm looking for. And I don't have to please anybody but myself.
So you're already seeing it in your head as
it's
a
parallel
picture.
play.
Yeah.
It's totally parallel play. So if I get stuck on the words, then I can go on with the drawings. If I get stuck in the drawings, then I can
Right.
play with the words. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really, it just, from the outside, it seems like it must be incredibly frustrating for children's book authors and illustrators. We had James and Lisa Ransom on, and James illustrates a lot of Lisa's books. but like a year and a half after she's written them, so
Yeah.
it's like you think that there's this like collaborative thing going on, and I think there, as they said, there is in advance, when they're kind of conceptualizing the work, but then she writes the story, and then a year later, her book comes up in his docket, and then he does it, and it's totally non-collaborative. So I'm wondering, if you're the author, obviously you're gonna consult with yourself.
Some days I don't.
Yeah, right. Well, so do you find yourself, going back and changing the words, or after having had certain revelations?
I change the words right up to the very last day it's sent off. Even after it's sent off, I read it over and over again, and
I mean, we all edit. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, but
you don't draw the pictures.
Well, editing the illustrations is a big thing.
Yeah.
You can't changing the words, easy peasy, right? I mean,
doing the words, is kind of unusual that I never thought I could write or ever dreamed of writing. I do find writing much easier than illustrating. Illustrating, I have this image in my head that's usually wonderful, and then when it travels from my brain down my arm and out my hand, because I'm not a digital artist, it always disappoints me.
Yep.
And I tend to like my words more, and I often can't even look at my books for, I still think I'm embarrassed. All I see is mistakes, which I'm not sure as writers of novels
No, we do.
Well, yeah, if you've read any of our stuff, you'll know.
Yeah, right. Wait, speak for yourself. Just a minute.
Filled with errors.
For what it's worth, I was an art major, and that's the way I always felt about everything I ever created in art, was that I had an image in my head, and what was on the page or what I painted never matched, never achieved it.
But are you happier with your words?
Yeah, I can drink while I'm doing that, so it's much easier.
Well, it is. There's this, when you have the idea, even as just a writer who cannot draw, you have the idea for the book, and it's kind of perfect, and it's just like this little thing. It's this nugget of a thing, and it's perfect as a thing, and theoretically it could become a perfect book, but it has not happened yet. So there's always this kind of, there's a joy in writing and a joy in finishing it, but it's never going to be as perfect as that original idea.
Right.
No. So it's the same. Obviously,
Across the spectrum,
that you have a wonderful idea, and I think every single book I have written and illustrated, I've intended it to be completely and utterly different than it ends up, and it takes me a while to get over the total embarrassment of it, and then it is what it is, and you send it out and you hope people like your children.
But then when
they
you
don't.
win something like the Caldecott, doesn't that suggest to you that perhaps the product is better than you thought it was?
Or that the Caldecott people don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, well, that's the other possibility too.
Well, the Caldecott is very political. I have come to not respect awards of any kind, having judged a couple myself, and knowing the process is like an argument right down to the end. And sometimes when you think you're all on board, then it changes, and you think, well, what? So I actually, I can't say I respect awards. And I don't think awards, how can there be one best book? How can there be one best illustrated book? How can there be one best movie? How can there be one best movie score? No, there isn't. And I just think it sets people up for, just ridiculousness. And I just, I don't care about them. Honestly.
All right.
That's why I won't allow
Here.
awards to be given to me.
I would give them back. I would give.
So here's a question. Can I
thank
ask a question about your characters?
No, never.
Or my character?
You're not your character.
Yeah.
Your characters, the ones you made.
Yeah.
So are they all mostly kitties?
No, actually. I mean,
There's people in
there are
there.
Give a
people.
follow-up there,
Is that
Mary?
Kitties.
Kitties.
I have written a lot about many of my cats. That's true. That was an excellent meow.
I have cats. Thank you for noticing.
All right.
Sound.
All right.
Could
But
you repeat it, Kelly?
Meow. That wasn't as good. The first one was
No,
better.
the first one was
It always is,
natural.
are you better at hissing?
That's right. You know, you have this idea to make a meow sound, and it's perfect, and then you try to recreate it.
It's never the same.
I think you have to go for a different meow, go for an angry meow or something like
This
that.
is true.
Have you guys thought about therapy? I mean, I'm just
I want to hear about the
Isn't that what we're here for?
kitty characters.
Kitty characters.
All right, yes,
Kitty
I have
characters.
written kitty characters, and they're all, even though, you know, Skippy John Jones is my most well-known kitty character, he is based on a real cat named Skippy John Jones. So,
What was your cat?
and he sounded an awful lot like Antonio Banderas. So, yeah, so my...
In real life, he sounded
in
a
real
lot.
life. And what I wanted to say is the very first book I wrote was about my great Aunt May, and she was just made, you know, she was one of 13 children, May McGuire. She lived with, she fed all the stray animals, took care of all the birds that had broken wings, and she had a canary that lived on top of her head. Which is why I wasn't
real?
always comfortable going to her house, because of course the bird didn't have diapers, so it was a little, you know.
Seriously.
This is
An
true.
ant
She had-
with a bird that lived
She had
on
a
her
little
head.
bird on her
And
head
pooped on her head.
and
clearly.
pooped everywhere.
Okay.
This is your
Everywhere.
mother's sister?
My mother's aunt, my great aunt.
I see.
So she was the first book I wrote, and she was the character that I lied about and said, "Oh yeah, I can write. I'm a good writer." Then,
I got an ant with a bird on her head. I can write, damn it.
God damn it, that's right. So then I wrote about my great grandmother, her name was Annie Burns, and she came from County Fermanagh, Ireland, and she was Ralph Waldo Emerson's cook. So I wrote a book about
cook 'em?
transcendentalism for the elementary school set.
They need it.
They need
do.
it. They
It's
need
working
it.
in
Many
those
of them have
classrooms.
transcended.
No, that meditation thing is working now. You were ahead of your time, Miss.
I was way ahead of my time, but my great grandmother and her sister Rose provided a wonderful story, and I have written about. What else have I written? Oh, Sarah Schachner and Sarah Bella's Thinking Cap, a daydreamer, and I've written about a Viking ship. Our daughters Sarah and Emma, who when Emma was turning 10, I think, requested a Viking ship for her birthday, and and that's all she asked for. And Bob Schachner was reading the Philadelphia Inquirer, and there was one advertised in the Inquirer one Sunday morning after months and months and months of little girls saying, "I want a Viking ship for my birthday," a real one. And it was 29 feet long, $7,000, used by a little old Norse woman who took it out on weekend raiding parties.
Of course. With
And-
elves to Iceland. I know how that works.
Exactly, and so it said you know, $7,000 or best offer, and Bob showed it to the girls, and so Emma said, "Shake out your piggy bank, Sarah," and they came up with $128 in nickels, dimes, and quarters, and they wrote a letter, and they drew Viking ships all over it, and Sarah wrote Ina and Inga based on the old Kirk Douglas film, The Vikings.
Oh, the Vikings. Yeah.
And they,
Curtis.
yeah, Tony Curtis and Kirk Douglas, and so they sent it off, and a couple of weeks, almost a week later, we received a letter from Ivar Christensen, the head of the Leif Erikson Society. I know this is a long story, but
it's a good
but it ends well, where no one else made an offer for the ship. And so we ended up with a 29-foot ship in our backyard.
I didn't realize that you only paid $120 for it.
Well,
Because I knew you.
we paid a wee bit more for it.
Yes.
Ooh, how
Shipping?
much?
We paid $700 for it because we were going to buy Emma like a swing set. She didn't want a swing set, but she had made the deal with the Viking men, and the Viking man who lived in Wallingford, who actually had the ship dry docked in his backyard, was so moved by two little girls who knew so much about Vikings that it brought tears to their eyes, and they just thought, "Oh my God, these children should have it," because the whole purpose of the Leif Erikson Society is to educate children about Vikings and Viking history and how they came here 500 years before Christopher Columbus. And Emma used to wear a little shirt to school that said "Leif landed first," and get into little arguments with the Christopher Columbus Club, you know. So it was a
Three falls
perfect
out of
story.
four in mud. Yeah, right.
And full circle. So this book was turned into a beautiful musical, and it happened to be the musical that at Parkland High School, the day
man.
the shooter came
Oh
in.
man.
They were rehearsing
Oh man.
the Vikings, which is just a very
Oh,
strange
God.
circular story.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh. I love the story about Vikings.
Yeah.
I like the story about the canary on Auntie's head.
Yes, and yet Judy is so well known for her Skippy John Jones characters. I've seen you at readings and at book signings when people come, you might have many books to sell or on display, and the kids come in clutching their old copies of their Skippy John Jones books, and yet I see also what you're working on next, and which is another amazing character, and I wondered if this new character is
Scottish character.
the affection you might have for this new character is overtaking, your affection for Skippy John Jones, or can you not choose among your characters?
Can you choose among your children? No,
Yes,
you can't.
You
Do
can?
you see him?
Oh.
do you
Yes,
see
she
him-
says yes, you
Do you
can.
see him
Choose
pulling
among your
ahead?
children.
You see your new character pulling
You
ahead
know,
in cuteness?
I
You hope?
don't know, because Skippy has done something that is like kind of the only dream of a character doing.
Turning into Antonio Banderas.
Oh yeah.
Connecting.
The
His
best thing
mischief.
about Skippy is, as authors, you travel around the country and you speak to large audiences. And my favorite thing is, people always say, why did you make him speak, with a Spanish accent, or why did you include Spanish? And it's because it was a confluence of things that happened. In my family, we all watched Zorro with Antonio Banderas one night. And you can't say Antonio Banderas.
No.
You have to say Antonio Banderas.
Yes.
You have to say that, right?
That's how you would
Yes,
say
you do.
it.
So it's a beautiful language, and I studied it in high school, and and I used to pretend I was Zorro when I was a nun version of Zorro, because
nun
Back up.
version.
A nun version of Zorro.
Well, that black
A nun
robe.
by day, Zorro by night. Is that
kind of like that, maybe both at the same time.
okay?
I
The
grew up in an
Whipple's
Irish
gonna
Catholic
be a real pain
hospital.
in the butt for.
I grew up in an
for
Irish
Zorro.
Catholic hospital. Too much work. I grew up in an Irish Catholic home, so
The hospital was good though.
it's where I belonged, and it's where I dreamed of. My stories are always about orphans and abandonment and everything, but nuns played a huge role. I used to draw hundreds of thousands of women, just women, glamorous women, and they all gave it up to go into the convent, and then they all fell in love with a very handsome English doctor because they had tuberculosis.
This is the dark side coming out. I see.
But that was
Shifting the story.
that was my 8-year-old self.
I see.
So, what was the game? Oh yeah, so I've always loved Zorro.
Yes.
I feel like
Well,
this is.
Who
and you
doesn't?
said that your cat sounded Spanish when she meowed. Or
Yes.
he meowed.
So he came down into the kitchen one day. He went down. He had some kitty crunchies. He went down to the basement, and he was digging a little tunnel to China, making a pyramid. And he was stung by a bee. And he came up. I actually heard him in the pipes of I have an old house. We have an old house. Bob does live with me.
But perhaps
to
not
say
after
we.
today.
It's not just about me.
With Bob.
Yeah, so I get down, I hear this banging around. Skippy's up in the pipes chasing a bee, and then he gets stung. And he has like this large gumballed, fur-covered bump on his head. And I picked him up, and I remember, I think I called Bob at work, and I said, I think I have to take him to the vet. And then the first milagro happened, and he said, Mamalita, I see the fire of love burning in your heart for me, and all I want to do is to stop, to drop, and to roll. And that is where the character came from. And for some reason, having seen Antonio Banderas, you know how we all make our pets speak to,
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
Well, that's the way he spoke to me. And he always like, oh yes.
Oh yes.
And so my greatest pleasure is going to a large audience. One time I spoke to an audience of 1,500 people. It was in Texas at a fundraiser, and Michael Connelly was there, and I made the whole audience sit up straight in their seats, and I said, repeat after me. And they all said, Nasonex. And they're all going, what? And then I said, now pretend you're looking in the mirror at yourself. And they all, sit up, and they're all wondering. And I said, now say, oh yes. And I said, and that's all you have to know. Because that language and the accent that goes along with it is so powerful that a man who can make Nasonex sound like the most beautiful word in the English language, it's brilliant.
It
I
is.
think it's amazing that an idea that came up from the purest place, inspired by your own cat and your own family, could have found us where we are here in 2019.
The dock turn
With
in the road.
poor Skippy, Skippy on the banned books list for the very thing that makes him unique, his use of Spanish. And do you travel around the world talking about that? Do you have anything you want to say about that, or should we just start speaking French right now?
We
We can.
Well, yeah, I thought, perhaps either he should see a Boston Terrier, because I'm from Boston,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
that's scary, and you could have him sound
the next
like a
thing
bar.
you're gonna do.
But the sad thing about the Skippy dilemma is that actually, several years before Skippy was even created, I used to visit schools all over the place, and I was always aware of the Spanish-speaking community of children that had to speak English all day. And whenever I spoke to them in what little Spanish I knew, they were so thrilled and excited that I would include them in. They're like,
Right.
you speak Spanish. And of course I had shown pictures of my cats, and then I would, he was the great sword fighter. They loved it. So I have traveled all over the country, east, west, north, south. I've been to El Paso. I've been invited, by Mexican-American principals to schools with like a 90% immigrant population in Alamosa, Colorado. And the reason I'm invited to these places is because these books help bridge a gap between the Spanish speakers and the non-Spanish speakers.
Right.
Now, what I'm criticized for in these books is that they assume that I'm making fun of the Spanish language. Now, these are 32-page picture books. So you have a character who's the equivalent of a 4-year-old child. When a 4-year-old child is pretending to be a character or pretending to speak a language, they kind of do it phonetically.
Right.
And so
And quickly, because it's 32 pages.
Yeah.
and quickly.
Yes.
But what is always left out, yes, they say, she does mock Spanish, and she's making fun of and stereotyping the Mexican culture. And they also are assuming that the characters I am creating represent Mexicans, which is, no, he's a Siamese kitten who is
Who represents Siam.
who is
Thailand will be speaking up next.
He's the only boy in a family of females. Junebug is a single mom. There are 3 sisters, and he looks very different from them. He has a large head and he has large ears. Right. And if you look at his bedroom carefully, you will see that he has calendars, Chihuahua calendars, all over his walls, and his mother has pictures of Siamese cats wearing neckties, proper, and he's got them all marked, red X'd
Crossed
out.
out. Yeah.
Because he desperately wants to be, he feels that's what he sees himself as.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what he desperately wants to be.
That's how he identifies.
That's how he identifies, and in his comfort zone. And we've all had children.
Yes.
Sarah Shackler
Different.
would wear Mr. Potato Head glasses, look in the mirror with a cape on, and say she was John Lennon. And that was at a young age. Emma thought she was an American Red Fox. When they looked in the mirror, they believed this.
Right. Yeah.
So this was the idea. So you have a 4-year-old little kitten, or a 4-year-old child, who looks in the mirror, and he feels powerful and feels good about himself because he's not one of those girls in his house. He's a Chihuahua.
So how ridiculous is this getting?
Oh, it's,
And how were you? How did this banned book thing happen? They call you up and say your book is banned? I mean,
oh yeah, the ALA notified me because they go to bat for you. Even though that the strange story about this is that I know, and I've known for a while, that public school librarians have taken it upon themselves to ban my books in their schools, even though they have no right to do that. And I know in their own words, and I've heard this, they're the most popular books in the school, we can't keep them on the shelves, but they are racist books, and they are not, we're not going to allow them in the school. And so I've known for a while this has been happening, but what people don't understand is that the letters that I receive on a weekly basis, like half of them are from bilingual families, and from families who say to me, these books are a godsend for us because they sort of reflect the language in our family, and they're fun to read. And you know, I get letters. My grandfather speaks Chinese and Spanish. I love these books. I get letters every day from kids who are. It's just mind-boggling. But there are two papers. The scholarship on Skippy is. I think is outrageous because in these papers, and they state things that, you know, Schachner represents Mexicans as uneducated, alcoholic, living in shacks. So if you read the scholarship on it, it is rather, what books are you reading?
How did you get from cats to
alcoholic?
All cats are
living in
alcoholics.
shacks?
Well,
Little cats.
the first time it really came to a head, I was at the Austin Book Festival, and a very, 400 people, families in the afternoon, and they were all Skippy fans. And one girl stood up. She was from the University of Austin, Texas. And she said to me, Mrs. Schachner, how does it make you feel that you destroy the lives of Latino children every day with your books? Which took me,
Yes.
when you're in front of a group, I was shocked. And then I said, well, I'm glad I sort of gathered my wits, and I said, well, please tell me how I do this. Then she said, well, you portray the Mexicans as uneducated. And I said, how do I... well, for one, they're not Mexicans. They're beanbag velveteen dogs that are filled with beans. So I said, they don't live in shacks, or uneducated. And I said, if you read Lost in Spice, you'll notice that the dogs have an equation inside the crater on Mars that you need a PhD to solve. And I said, go on. She said, well, you write about beans. And I said, that's because they're beanbag dogs. And I said, and you failed to mention that, for one, I love the word frijoles. I think it's a beautiful word. I much prefer that to beans. And I said, I grew up in we had baked beans. So I said, if you see the list of beans that I write about, it's a long list of every kind of bean that exists. So I said, I think, when I go to a Mexican restaurant, I eat rice and beans very often. Just like, the Irish are known for their stew or whatever. I said, that's part of your food. It's delicious. I love it. She went on to say, you portray them as living in shacks. And I said, well, obviously you didn't read the end of a 32-page book where the dogs live in a Victorian mansion in the town of Pato Pato Ganzo, and they have dog bone wallpaper and silver bowls, and they have, wingback chairs. I said, the shack happens to be one inn that they're stuck in waiting for Skippy to come because their house is haunted by a bobblehead.
So this is a scholar who is not really
Work that
studied,
out.
who's
Go
not
ahead.
really done her homework.
Well, and I just heard from a friend who was co-teaching a course at Edinburgh University in Scotland, and she wrote to me and said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but so this scholarship is in textbooks that are being taught all over the country, all over the world, that I have written. My books are examples of racist literature.
And yet, the books continue to sell, and the children can continue to love them. So, children are not reading those scholarly
Okay,
works.
this is a really
text.
serious
Yes,
issue
It
that
is.
affects
It is, and I don't mean to make
publishing
light of
and
it.
writing and circulation of books and our culture altogether.
Yeah.
And so can you fight back? Are you fighting back? We should all fight
Or
back.
are you moving on?
Well, both maybe.
For one, the sad thing about this in the list is that all the other books on the list are attacked from the right wing. I'm the only one that's attacked from the left wing, from my people. So it's kind of ironic. It's very sad that no one understands that I may have a relationship with a Latino community that no one's ever questioned or interviewed or asked me about ever. And I think that it's sad that we're all duct taping one another. Now, I grew up in an Irish Catholic home. I married a Jewish man, and
Well, you're damned.
in my home.
Yes, of course.
And in his
Yeah,
home.
right.
But growing, marrying into a Jewish home, which had its struggles, in the beginning too. But now every other word out of my mouth is oi.
Right.
Or, shmata, or, mensch. Or, so, his grandmother was from Kiev, and she would always have this thick, Russian Yiddish accent. Oh, Judy, I remember the pogroms. And so I always wanted to write a book using her voice. And language is so fluid. And, in America, we seem to have, there are purists. So, we're not allowed to wear, kimonos, or that's seen as appropriation of culture. We're not allowed to, even if you're not you're not allowed to even cook the food because you're not authentically from a country. So we're duct taping ourselves off in pure little sections. And America's language is made up, as far as I know, from every culture that has come here. And
I was going to say,
Right.
which flavor of purity are you talking about
Right.
today?
well, that's the sad part, because whose opinion matters more? Those that say I have no right to do this, those that say I am making fun of a culture rather than celebrating a culture, rather than having children want to learn Spanish. And what they also don't realize is at the end of 8 books, there's a very large Spanish vocabulary, not just Skippy's
Right.
vocabulary,
Right.
but,
Right.
I really go out of my way to try to include all
Some learning.
kinds of vocabulary. And, parents say, oh, my kid wants to speak Spanish because of you. So we're doing children should be allowed to, I think it was Ursula Le Guin who once said that children love language. They love the sound of language. And I just the other day thought, language for children should be like trying on a pair of pants. You try them on. You try on language like clothing and the sounds of it. And having grown up in a neighborhood, I had a Saudi Arabian family next to me. I had Italians below me, French Canadians across the street, German Jews behind me, and I heard all of those accents all the time. And as a little kid who had a lot to overcome when she was growing up, I would spend hours in my little room, and all of those languages would waft in and out. And I pretended to be all of those people. I pretended my characters all spoke those pretend languages. And so now we have to tell children, you can't pretend to love something else, and it's
Right.
just, to me, so I don't know what I'm going to do about this.
Right. But your next book, it has a different name.
Yes.
It is not Skippy John.
No,
It is. Tell us the name of the next book that's
Stretchy
coming out.
McHandsome.
Stretchy
Stretchy
McHandsome.
Yes, and I
coming out in
asked
October.
Greg if he could be stretchy today.
I would love to be stretchy today.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
He's Scottish. Is he stretchy?
Yes.
Yes, and he's a feral. He is one of 9 siblings, and they're feral, and they live in a box with no one in charge. And he ends up meeting little Beanie McBride, who is looks a lot like him.
Yeah.
They both are, ginger, butterscotch colored. They both have different colored eyes. He wears a stinky sardine around his neck, and she wears a wild woolly mitten. And
Wild woolly mitten.
and
Love
they,
it.
they fall in love and trade
Oh.
2 things of sardine for the mitten, and they do a lot of stretching.
Oh, well,
But,
we were lucky enough to see some of the early illustrations. It looks absolutely adorable, and we're
gorgeous.
so looking forward to it. And we're unfortunately at the end of our time with Judy Shackner, which is amazing and
When does
great.
Stretchy come out?
But I don't know. Yeah, Stretchy comes out
That's
October
a personal
8th.
question, actually.
Stretchy comes out. Bob, would you like to answer that? October 8th. October 8th, right? Am I right? That's
Yes.
the date.
Yes.
And
October 8th.
I think I failed to mention that we have a final question that we ask of all our guests. And I know that you'll do well, even
Turn it down.
not knowing that this is the final question. We ask them to tell us 2 lies and a truth, and we will guess the true thing about themselves. We can give you a moment to gather.
Take your time, because I'll edit the moment out.
Yes, he will.
To
2
gather, to
lies and a
fume, to
truth.
curse Kelly.
Two lies and a
Right.
truth.
And then
we
we
will.
guess.
We vote.
And then
we
we
vote
guess.
on
All
which
right.
is true.
And just so you know, generally we do tell our guests ahead of time.
Yes.
We do.
Yeah,
and
thank
I
you.
failed.
Thank you very much for not giving me this
Sorry.
warning.
You can do a new character based on Dummy McDummerson. That's me.
All right, so I just give you these.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
right?
And you can make up, if you want, you can make up the lies about Kelly.
Yeah.
You can.
And
You
Judy,
can.
just so you know, we're dreadfully bad at this game, so
Yes.
don't worry about it. We're awful.
We'll get it wrong anyway.
God, put me on the spot.
Yeah, really.
All right, I offered Joni Mitchell spaghetti in my kitchen while petting the fur off of my cat. Let me see.
She was petting the fur off your cat?
I was wondering
I was
about
petting
the
the fur off
spaghetti.
my cat.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so that's one. I actually spent 6 months in the convent, and then I changed my mind.
So you're unconventional.
That is not Peter Sagal worthy.
Get him.
Okay.
Get him off the stage now.
Get the hook.
Okay.
And I married a man who shared a piece of pizza with Mick Jagger. Woo!
I'm going to recuse myself, as I think I know.
And these are 2 lies and 1 truth.
Yeah.
Well, based on Kelly's reaction,
Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, come on. She dumped out at the
I'm
last
going
one. It's
pizza.
I think it's the pizza.
You think that's the lie?
You think
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
truth.
the lie. Oh,
She
wait.
thinks
Oh,
it's
wait a
true.
second.
Wait,
Are we
so-
voting on the truth or the
Is it
lie?
2 truths or 2
Two
lies?
lies?
What was I supposed to do?
Which
whatever you do.
I don't even know anymore.
It's supposed to be
lies.
2 lies and a truth. Did you do the
I
opposite?
did
I don't know where the lies
Okay.
end and
So
the
you
truth
did
begins.
truth?
So one lie.
All right, so we'll pick the lie.
One lie?
I gave you 1 lie.
Okay.
lie.
I'm still
Okay,
recusing myself.
I'm doing convent.
Yeah, the middle one's the lie then.
Yeah, the
Convent.
convent's the lie.
Convent's the lie.
Right.
We got it.
Well, I knew the Joni Mitchell.
I wasn't
Joni
lying
Mitchell
about
story.
you, was I?
did.
Yeah, I did. The Joni Mitchell story is
You
legendary.
gave Joni Mitchell spaghetti.
I offered her
Oh, you
spaghetti
offered her spaghetti.
Apparently, there's too much cat hair
And
on
he
it.
had pizza
on the meatballs.
and pizza
Harry
with Mick Jagger.
Meatballs.
He did.
Bob was a is a music producer, so sort of famous. What?
At the time, he was a
roadie.
A
roadie.
roadie.
He wore a
Can't say that.
stinky
Roadie.
sardine around his neck.
All right. Well, Judy, thank you so much.
So much,
was
Judy.
great.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
And yeah, we're going to stick around for more. But yeah, thanks.
Judy's books are here.
I fell in love with you this hour.
If you enjoy the Liars Club podcast and the other fine shows on Project Entertainment Network, check out the cool stuff for sale at the Project Entertainment Network store or consider supporting Project Entertainment Network on Patreon.com. And as always, many thanks for your continued support.
Hi, this is Brian Keene. I'm an international best-selling, award-winning horror novelist.
No comment!
I know where the bodies are buried, and now I'm telling you their location every week on The Horror Show.
Pardon, no comment, don't you understand?
We discuss the latest news in horror novels, movies, comics, and games, and interview the biggest names in the business.
This interview is over. No comment!
Thursday nights at 7 p.m. only on Project Entertainment Network.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.